I believe that every decision we make has the potential to be the creation moment of a great story. Right in between the before and after, there is a tiny, tiny little space. But in that space, we decide what happens next. It's in the what happens next where we define who we are. It's what happens after you commit to something and you follow through or decide not to follow through. A year ago, this month, I attended my first TED event here in Singapore. There, I heard a story, an incredible story, about a woman who came to Singapore as a domestic worker and returned to her country to start her own business. It's a story of empowerment and education, and of someone deciding to change the narrative of her life. I was not the only one crying. Everyone in the audience was crying, so it was okay to cry. After the talks were over, Nilushika came to our group and introduced herself and said hello. She told us more about her business and the nonprofit work that she was doing, helping other women like herself start their own business. I was quite impressed that someone could do so much with so little. So I offered my help, and she said yes. And I wish my pledge of help would be more poetic and have more emotion, but it was as simple as that. I said, Nilushika, I'm going to help you realize a dream. And she said, okay. That was that. 4 months later, Nilushika and I met again. I was finishing a case study and had time to take up a new one. So I checked her Facebook feed and noticed that not much had changed. So I saw an opportunity where I could help her. I contacted her and I offered to coach her. Coincidentally, she was coming to Singapore the next day. So we met and we talked and we decided that she would be my next case study. We were going to explore the possibility of helping her launch her own tea brand. Along the way, we met other people that joined in this story, people who I like to refer to as the heroes of this story. I met an incredible graphic designer who designed the logo and branding for Nilu Tea, a nonprofit guru who helps to keep Nilushika's business separate from her nonprofit work, a dream maker disguised as a tea producer, and a patient and wise mentor who keeps me sane. Everybody needs a coach, so even the coach got a coach. In July, I traveled to Sri Lanka to meet with their tea producers and take our own stock images. Up until this point, I had been using stock images I'd found on the internet, and my knowledge of tea production and my visuals of what our branding would be looking like was based on what I'd found on the internet. So our tea producer arranged for us to visit the tea factory, where we learn all there is to learn about tea. Ever since taking that tour, tea tastes so much better because I recognize and I remember all the hands it touches, from garden to cup. Quite a remarkable experience. After our tour of the factory, we were invited to go out to the tea gardens, where we could meet the tea pickers who had inspired our logo, our branding, and basically the vision and values for Nilu Tea. As a photographer, for me, this was a highlight in my career. It was absolutely enjoyable to be up in the mountains and create images that were absolutely satisfying. We decided to spend a little bit of time with them. And as we were getting to know each other, I suggested to Nilushika that she should show what the actual branding and logo looked like. One thing is to describe what it looked like, and another is to say, this is what it looks like. So I happened to have a printout of the cover page for our marketing presentation. I took it out, and I gave it to Nilu. And I said, Nilu, you should show it. So she did. As she starts to do that, a woman in the group shouts, we know this woman. This is Nirmala. And she's referring to the woman in the image. Of course, that could not be. That just doesn't happen. I'm still getting goosebumps because I remember how incredible that moment was. Eventually, someone went looking for this woman who they thought was Nirmala. And as we're waiting, we're all full of anxiety because there's so many things. This woman could look like the image, but not really be Nirmala. When she arrives, Nilu shows her the image and asks, "Is this you?" When Nirmala saw her image, she cried. We all cried. Ever since I came back to Singapore after that trip, I spent 2 days in bed crying because I could not comprehend how it could happen. But it did. There's a before Mary and an after Mary after this moment. Because I've been a photographer since the age of 13. But this was the first time I could see with my heart. And that's really not easy to comprehend. So what do you call this? Serendipity? Coincidence? God? The stars aligning to create a moment? Out of the 1 million possibilities, when I searched for tea picker, I was given 1 million possibilities. And out of those 1 million possibilities, I chose this image. And now this image returned to the mountain where it was originally taken. The sum of all my actions, all my decisions, all my good days, my bad days, my doubts, my fears, took me to a moment where I realized that I was meant to be there, and I was doing exactly what I was meant to do. If there was a way to measure the impact of our actions and our decisions, that was it. The message was clear. We are all connected. When I see this image, I see Nilu realizing a dream. I see a photographer's work going full circle when the image he took returned to the mountain, to the woman in that image. I see the TED platform and the reason why it exists, and how stories have the power to motivate us to go outside of our comfort zones. But the most important thing that I saw, or that I continue to see with that image, is that I didn't do it alone. And that is the greatest feeling in the world. Good stories are out there. And like beacons, they're sending invitations in the hopes that a game changer takes the bait. They want to meet you halfway, but you have to take a journey. You have to go and discover yourself. You have to discover the power that you have to create. You have to discover who you are and your limitations. Perhaps you'll discover that you have none. Every motivational quote out there has some truth to it. They're fragments of a universal language and wisdom that comes through when a person like myself experiences a glimpse of their life purpose. Up on top of that mountain, there was a 13-year-old girl who was absolutely excited that 25 years later, she had created an image that beautiful. There were also my doubts and my fears along with me. There was also passion, my mistakes. They were all there standing right next to me. And together we created something absolutely fantastic. There are 2,000 stories in this room. Which one are you going to be part of? Because I believe that today, you decide what happens next. Thank you.